Kia ora tātou. Tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou katoa, kua tatu mai nei runga i te karango te rā. Tēnei te mihi, tēnei te mihi. Me ki pēnei ko te mihi tuatai ki tō tātou nei kaihanga, nāna nei ngā mea katoa. Ki a rātou mā te hunga mate, a rā ko Papa Wenerei, Harrison. Rātou mā ki a rātou haere, haere moi mai rā. Ka hoki mai ki a tātou te hunga ora i karaputi mai nei e aku nui, i aku rahi tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe e te rangatira tākuta Makarena Dudley. Ko hara mai no tāmaki makaurau, tēnei te mihi. Ko hara mai ki wainga i a mātou, ki te kōrero e pāna ki tēnei. Kaupapa, tino whaitake mo tātou, te iwi Māori, o tira mo tātou ngā tāngata katoa. Nō reira, kei te mihi. Kei te mihi ki a kōrua, ko hara mai no ahi te reiria, Jerome, Dania. Tēnei te mihi ki a kōrua hoki. O tira ki a koutou katoa, tēnā koutou. Good evening. I acknowledged. Oh, hara mai, hara mai. I start off my kōrero through acknowledging our Heavenly Father, acknowledging those who have passed on, in particular our Wenerei, Rex Harrison, who laid at Kariaka and Ruatoria in the Ngāti Porou territory. And then I brought it back to us who have joined here today. Dr Makarena Dudley, who's joined us from Tāmaki Makaurau. It's great to have you here. Makarena, and also our two guests from Australia, Jerome and Dania. I hope I pronounced that correctly, Dania. But to everyone who has come from near and afar, welcome. We also have whānau I picked up from the airport at 2:30 from the bioengineering, Auckland Bioengineering Institute there. Welcome back to Gisborne. Koutou katoa, tēnā koutou. On that note, I'll start us off with a karakia. Kia inoi tātou. Hei mua koe i a mātou e ihua, hei tohutohi a mātou mahi katoa. Ko koe anō hoki hei whakakaha i a mātou kia whai korooria ai koe i a mātou mahi katoa. Hei mea tīmata, hei mea mahi. Hei mea whakaoti roto i a koe kia whiwhi ai hoki mātou i te ora tonu i te mea e ata whaitia e koe. Korooria ki tō ingoa tapu, āmine. E tō mātou matua nui te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tae mai tau rangatiratanga, kia me te tau e pai ai ki runga ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. Ho mai ki a mātou ai anei he taro mo mātou mo tēnei rā, murua o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei i o te hunga e harana ki a mātou. Awa hoki mātou e kawea kia whakawaea, engari whakaorangi a mātou i te kino, nau hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha, me te korooria, ake, 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 āmine. I'll pass over to Samantha.
Kia ora, Dave. Tēnā koutou katoa ko Samantha Holsworth Te Koingoa, nō Te Raka Hau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to see a wonderful Tairāwhiti community here, as well as our guests and from Auckland. I just want to say it's just a real pleasure to have Dr Dudley with us today. We've been trying to get Dr Dudley here for a couple of years now, and I think COVID was the reason we couldn't, and now we're here. It's wonderful, and Dr Dudley is going to be here with us for the AMP show tomorrow, as will be our wonderful Auckland Bioengineering Institute colleagues and GE Healthcare. How about now? I don't think this is working. I'll speak up. So I just want to mention that so Dr Dudley's work is a really wonderful example of medical research that we at Mātai are just very excited about supporting and celebrating. Dr Dudley is a real role model in clinical psychology who's contributed significantly to Aotearoa New Zealand, to the Aotearoa New Zealand community around the detection, the understanding and the education in mati whariwhari and dementia. Just a little more about Dr Dudley's bio. So she teaches cultural competence and coordinate cultural input in the doctoral program in the clinical psychology program at University of Auckland. She teaches neuropsychology at the undergraduate level, and she's interested in cognition and the ageing brain. And her current research is investigating mate wharewhare, that is dementia, in Māori, and she's leading a very large team of researchers and clinicians in the development of a Māori-friendly tool for detecting mate wharewhare. She's involved in the adaptation of the cognitive therapy program for Māori, and she's leading the ongoing project and the development of an app that provides information to whānau about mate wharewhare, and there's information right there in the pamphlet. So I just want to really talk more about Dr. Dudley. You know, a lot of her work, we feel, from our point of view, is really reflected in Mātai's name, actually. Mātai's name is, in whakatauki, is Te Mātai Mātai Hura, which means the investigative revealing eye. And, you know, the story, the Te Mātai Mātai Hura story, commemorates the story based on the whakatauki and the logo that was gifted by Mark Kopua, who's one of our local cultural artists of Tairāwhiti. And the story that Mark Kopua gifted to us relates to a meeting between the tohunga Te Kau Takitaki and Reverend Williams, who encouraged Reverend Williams to look into the puna, that is the pond, in which knowledge is reflecting back. And so when we understand what we're seeing, what's reflecting back at us, we can come to terms with it and enhance the depth of discovery, and then we can move forward. And that kind of, when I see the work that Dr. Dudley's doing, that kind of really reminds me of the story that the wonderful Mark Kopua gifted to us, that's reflected in our name. So really excited to welcome you, Dr. Dudley, and welcome also to GE Healthcare. And I'm going to introduce Jerome and Dinesh separately with their bios after Dr. Dudley's talk. So Jerome and Dinesh's talk starts at 5:30. So welcome again. Thanks, Dr. Dudley.
Ki te haukainga mō te iwi o Tairāwhiti, tēnā koutou. Ngā mihi mō tēnei honore mātai mō te karanga kia kōrero ahau mō te kaupapa o mate wareware. Kia koutou te hunga kua haere mai, tēnā koutou. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā hoki tātou katoa. So I hope you can hear me. I've got a bit of a croaky voice. Thank you very much for that lovely invitation, for that lovely introduction, and for the invitation. And it's just wonderful to finally get down here to Tairāwhiti. So, yes, I do a lot of research around mate wareware, and I do like to do research that makes a difference, if you like, or that is very translational or very applied, and something that will make a difference out there in the community. And the reason why this is so is because over the years I have spoken to many kaumātua, and they tell me what they would like to see happen in this particular area, and I carry their stories with me, and I feel like I have a responsibility, and my team have a responsibility to deliver the requests from them, to provide them with information, to get out there to develop a tool that more accurately diagnoses mate wareware and Māori. And so it's certainly a professional journey, but it's also a very personal journey. So, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today. It's a bit of a mishmash, actually, because I'm involved in quite a few different projects. So we'll touch on a few of those projects this evening. So now I've lost my clicker, but we probably don't need it, yeah. Okay, so just to put this research in context, let's look at some numbers. We've just put a few numbers up there. So our kaumātua Pākeke are living longer now, which means that the number of those elderly who are 65 years older increased by 41% between 2013 and 2018. That's a huge increase. And what this actually means is that there will be more kaumātua Pākeke who are being diagnosed with mate wareware. A study out of the memory clinic at Middlemore Hospital also shows, or certainly suggests, that Māori present with mate wareware at around about 8.5 years younger than New Zealand Pākehā. So, sort of like a lot of the other statistics that that we see in across the the health sector, the statistics for mate wareware dementia are not great for Māori either. So, first of all, what is dementia? And a lot of kaumātua ask me, well, what is dementia and what is Alzheimer's? And they get confused. So, just very quickly, dementia is a term, it's like an umbrella term, not unlike how we have the term cancer as an umbrella term, and there's all different types of cancer. Well, dementia is the umbrella term for a number of different types of dementia or mate wareware, and the most common one being Alzheimer's disease. Depending what article you're reading, 70 to 80% of people suffer from Alzheimer's disease. Vascular dementia is another one that's reasonably common, and that's an outcome of people who have strokes. Lewy body dementia Lewy body are just a type of protein that's found in the brain. Frontotemporal dementia is another type of dementia. And there's a lot of personality changes that take place at the beginning, at the early stages of frontotemporal dementia, because it affects that part of the brain. And of course, as we all know, a lot of the presentations, in fact, are mixed dementias. And some of my old age psychiatrists that I know in Auckland who get out there and meet people say that, in fact, most of the people that they work with, or most of their patients indeed, do have some mixed form of mixed dementia. And there are many other different types of dementias as well, too many to go into tonight, but there's alcohol-related dementia and Parkinson's disease dementia. So not all Parkinson's disease leads to dementia, but it can do. So, so the current Pākehā understanding of the dementia state is that it occurs as a result of the deterioration of brain cell function. And because of the slow process of this decline, the people or the persons or the whānau are living with the persons who are experiencing this decline may not notice it so much at first. So increasingly, we do recognise how that the brain is an important organ for our tinana, so it affects how our tinana, how our body functions, as well as it also affects other parts of ourselves, such as our moods, our thinking, our behaviour, our feelings, emotions, and decision-making capabilities. So our brains are made up of millions and billions of brain cells. Nerve cells. Now, these nerve cells talk to each other, and they communicate. They korero with each other, and they tell us how to interact and how to respond appropriately to the world around us. During mate wareware, these cells lose the ability to communicate with each other, and eventually they die. And you can see in this shot here. In this slide here, the right-hand side is obviously has shrunken considerably, and you can see the language area and the memory area of the brain has shrunken considerably, and that's where the early signs of, or the early symptoms of mate wareware or dementia can be seen. So, in 1920, a list of risk factors were published that may lead, or the 12 risk factors that lead to mate wareware or dementia. And so these are less education, hypertension, so heart problems, hearing impairment if it hasn't been addressed. So if you are having hearing difficulties, make sure you get along and get some help. Smoking, obesity, depression, physical inactivity, diabetes, excessive alcohol consumption, and I think traumatic brain injury, and air pollution was the 12th risk factor that was identified. What you might notice if you look at this slide and at these various risk factors is that they are all modifiable, so we can all make changes to our lives to decrease or to remove these risk factors from our lives and therefore lower the risk of getting dementia. They do say that if you can decrease these risk factors, it can prevent the onset of dementia by up to 40%, which is a huge amount. So it's really worthwhile us knowing this kind of information. And this is the sort of information that the kaumata wanted to know. Of course, they don't know this kind of information, but it's our obligation to get this information out there so that people can do something about it to prevent the onset of the disease. And often the disease, when it does manifest, when it is seen, it's actually started in the body maybe decades before in that person's lifetime. So the earlier you start leading a life devoid of these risk factors, the better the chances that you won't get dementia. So in a very well-known study that was conducted here in Aotearoa, the Lilac study, which was looking at the health and well-being of octogenarians in a sample of the New Zealand population. What they did was they were applying the 3MS, which is the Modified Mini Mental State Exam, and that's just a screening tool to see if people might have mild cognitive impairment or dementia. And when they were testing the Māori cohort in that particular study, on the score, they were scoring which the score they were achieving indicated that they had dementia. But of course, on the follow-up visit by the clinician indeed was finding that they didn't have dementia. So the reason why I'm putting this slide up is because this is where I kind of come into it. And so my background is in neuropsychology, and it's like testing how well people's thinking abilities are usually after some kind of insult to the brain. And so what I've always been kind of harping on about for many years, in fact, was developing or adapting tools that are appropriate for Māori, that are valid in terms of their findings or in terms of their diagnosis, that are also meaningful to Māori and are relevant to Māori and are valid. And so this is an example of the 3MS, which is a very widely used screening tool, misdiagnosing our people. So I just kind of wanted to mention that because I'm going to let you see what I've done in response to that in response to that study. So what we did was we thought, okay, we're going to develop our own tool, and we applied for funding. We got funding from the Health Research Council of New Zealand, and we had two aims for our project. So it was a large grant over 3 years. And first of all, we wanted to develop a Māori worldview of dementia. This is not the right version. It's a few mistakes on there, but anyway, you get the gist. So we wanted to develop a Māori worldview from a Māori perspective, to develop a Māori-friendly diagnostic tool to help detect mate wareware. So I'm a researcher who believes that research on Māori should be led by Māori. So the named investigators on all my research team are Māori, so the column on the left-hand side are all Māori. But of course we have our non-Māori, our Pākehā colleagues who bring an enormous amount of expertise and specialisation to assist with this, and they do all this mahi for us in kind. So we've got a really great team. And we, of course, have a tumuaki ropu, so a group of kaumātua to guide us and to advise us right all along the way. So I never do, I don't do anything really unless I've consulted with our kaumātua group as to if that's the right thing or not. And they soon let me know either way. So this is just us getting together at the end of the third year. It's extended a little bit because of COVID, so we're actually now into our fifth year, but we are about to finish the study, and I'll talk a wee bit about it shortly. So we went around the motu, we interviewed 232, actually up to 300 kaumātua and their whānau around the motu in these various areas: Kaitaia, Auckland, Hamilton, Taranaki, Whakatane, Wellington and Christchurch. And we then got together and identified themes from the data that were recurring and kept popping up. So I've just got a couple of photos up here. We started off in Kaitaia, which is where I hail from, and I've just realised I forgot to do my pepe ha, but never mind. So we started off in Kaitaia, and then we moved to, actually we went to Kiriroa, to Auckland from there, and then Kiriroa, but I don't have photos of those actual interviews of those hui. This is in Taranaki, and these are the lovely kuia from Taranaki singing us a waiata about their beautiful maunga. And we ended up, no we didn't, we went down to Christchurch, to one of the most beautiful marae I've ever seen. And we had a huge turnout of people there. That wasn't even a quarter of the number of kaumātua who turned up that day. And we finished up in Whakatane. That was our last hui that we held around the country. You can see a picture of, you can see in that picture Oliver Menzies, who's a geriatrician at Auckland Hospital. Now he's Ngāti Kahungungu, and what we did at the end of every session was that we gave an information session back to the kaumātua, the kuia, because they wanted to know a lot of facts and figures about mate ware, about dementia, and so this is what we gave them, or this is what we provided. But what I really want to talk about today is a Māori view of mate ware, which came out of the study. So some of the main findings, or just some of the findings, the first one is, not surprisingly, none of the kuia kaumātua liked the word dementia, and they didn't like the word Alzheimer's, and I think there's a lot of people who don't. They didn't want to use that word. It conjures up a lot of negative associations. So I said, okay, well, what do you, what kupu do you want to use? Well, it differed from rohi to rohi, from area to area, depending on what word that was used, eh? So what we found was the term that was most commonly used across most iwi was the term mate ware. And this means, mate in this context means to be sick or unwell, and ware means forgotten. So that's the term that we've gone with. That is not to say that if in your iwi that is not the term you would prefer, that's not as to say that you have to use it, but that's just, as I said, that's the term that suited most iwi. Another finding, or another theme that came out recurrently, was the kaumātua, the kuia, talking about their wairua not being asked about by the physician, by the doctor, by the psychiatrist, whoever. And this really disturbed many of them. Many of them spoke about this. This disturbed them because to them that was the most important part of their unwellness, was their wairua, was their spirituality. It was the most important aspect of their health and well-being. So that was really interesting. And another theme that came through, which was really sad, and it horrifies me to this day, was the lack of information about mate ware that's out there now. Generally for the public in New Zealand, there's not a lot. Alzheimer's New Zealand website is pretty good, and most of their pages are on Te Reo Māori, so they are good. But for Māori who are out in more remote areas who don't have access to the internet or whatever. You know, they just don't get the information. Now, I had so many kaumātua sitting there in the audience, and I remember one queer quite distinctly. She sat there and she said, "Well, I'm just waiting for my dementia to come," and she thought, like many of them, she thought it was just something that happened as you got older. And of course I had to really reassure them that no, actually most of you won't be getting mate ware. So this is the kind of misinformation that's out there, because they're not being told anything else. They don't have access to the right information. And I find that really sad. And I think that's one of, you know, that's one story that I carry with me. And that is one of the themes, I think, that motivated me to do some research I'm going to talk about, or the app actually. So many Māori, we found, did understand mate ware as a debilitating disease, and a lot of them pictured it or placed it or contextualised it in the ongoing intergenerational effects of colonisation, such as the loss of rongoa Māori medicine, the introduction of Pākehā medicines, the loss of the tohanga, the practice of tohanga, changes in cultural practices and lack of access to traditional foods for many. And actually, if you look through those themes that came up, they do kind of match with some of the risk factors that can lead to mate ware. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of credibility to these ideas that the kaumātua were coming up with, that, you know, people who are taking, some of our kaumātua who are taking multiple medication of an evening, it can confuse them, they can get confused. And so that's why they were connecting it up with mate ware. Traditional kai, I think, was, in the old days, as we know, in Te Ao Māori, was very healthy. And so, unfortunately, a lot of us don't have a healthy diet in contemporary times. So these are not, you know, these are quite within actually what we perceive as being ways to reduce mate ware. There was a lot of talk about whānau, and like pretty much any disease or any health condition that Māori face, the whānau is central to anybody living with mate ware. And that came out in many various ways. Like, often they would say they were only happy when they were with their kids, they were only happy when they were at home with their whānau, and so those kind of references to whānau came through all the time. And so it really, what we know also is that a lot of our kaumātua like to stay at home when they're unwell, even in the later stages, or the middle stages, or the later stages of mate ware, they have a preference to staying at home, and the whānau want them to stay at home. And this fits with our traditional way of caring for our sick. And this is all very well, and I think it's wonderful. So I heard many stories about whānau who would pool resources, who would come together, who would share the load. And that was a common thread. In fact, I was talking to somebody today whose whānau does the same thing. And that's all very well, but of course what we need is that we need to be able to financially support those whānau, because a lot of our whānau are not going into aged residential care. Therefore, the government is not providing the same amount or the equal amount of funding for Māori that they are for non-Māori who do go into aged residential care. So that's kind of something that the government is looking at the moment. So in the last budget, I mean, it's not a lot, it's a drop in the bucket, but they did dedicate $12 million to dementia services, and I want to make sure that some of that funding goes towards whānau who are keeping their kaumātua at home and looking after them. Because a lot of our whānau are already struggling financially, and then to take on this extra burden is just, you know, sometimes it's just too much for the whānau. not all whānau, or not all kaumata considered it to be a disease. Some kaumata, and I have to be honest, with the people that we interviewed, there weren't a lot, but there definitely are thoughts out there that mate ware is not perceived in a negative way, but rather as a part of a spiritual journey, and as a normal consequence of growing old. And at a stage where the kaumata was actually being prepared to join their tupuna on the other side. And here's a lovely quote. I remember my aunties and uncles saying they were talking to the old people. They are with them. They are over on the other side. They are between two worlds, so don't worry about them. They are okay. And so I heard quite a few kaumata talk like this, and that was interesting. That was interesting from my perspective, who I guess I come from quite a Western background, and it was really nice to. And what this prompted me to do was actually try and look at mate ware, not so much from a negative space. So, you know, when a person gets a diagnosis of mate ware, it doesn't mean the end. It doesn't mean death. You know, there's a lot of living that these people can still do, and there is a lot of quality of life that that is part of that person's and that whānau's existence. So I think this is great to sort of create a space where mate ware is not the scary thing. It's just another illness that we deal with, and we just get on with it. So I was going to present, well, I didn't get over to the Hammond Care conference in the end because I was unwell, but the organisers spoke to me, they ahead of that, and they said to me, so these people in Australia, they said they just love how Māori have created our own term for dementia, Alzheimer's, and we're creating our own spaces it's not all negative. There are some wonderful positive things in there. And one of the things, of course, is when rangatahi, when tamariki rangatahi, when mokapuna become involved with their kaumata, become involved in their journey. So, you know, it's not all negative, and I really think I'd love to be able to move forward where we can create a journey that is less negative, if you like. And so we asked the kaumata what they thought was protective, and you know, these all make sense. So I heard a number of times, I heard the stories of our kuia. She would go onto the marae, and when she was on the marae, her mate ware, her dementia would disappear. She would just become normal. I heard that over and over again. So I think it is about being on the marae, but what that includes being on the marae. How does that help us up? For number one, it's a very familiar environment, and as we know, people with mate ware, they function at their best in an environment that's familiar to them. It's an environment where they feel safe, secure, and it's an environment where they probably feel a lot of aroha. It's an environment that reminds them of when they were little, growing up on the marae. So but not only that, they go onto the marae. You go onto the marae, you hear whaikoriroa, you hear waiata, you smell the smells coming out of the kitchen, you eat the kai. It's all these wonderful memories flow. Now this might sound a little bit hocus-pocusy, but it's not, because actually what you're doing is you're scintillating those neuronal pathways and activating them so that person is actually functioning to their optimum in that time period that they're on the marae. And once again, it sounds like somebody just make this up, but it's what I heard. When they left the marae, they would go back into their confused, disoriented state. So, to me, I've always believed that Māori health, Māori well-being a lot of it lies within our identity, within a positive Māori identity. And to me, this is evidence of it. Speaking to reo Māori, of course, a lot of the kaumata were reported as reverting back to their first language, which is Te Reo Māori, that was usually strapped out of them, or they were punished when they were 5 years of age, when they went to school and they weren't allowed, and then they got punished for speaking the reo. So they never spoke it again. But actually those pathways have already been formed, and they're there in the brain. And we know that in the brain of people who are bilingual, there's a lot of grey matter, a very dense grey matter. So we know there's a lot more activity in the brain of people who are bilingual as opposed to people who are monolingual. And so I would encourage anybody to encourage their kaumātua to speak the reo, because what you're doing is you're activating those pathways again. Now, often people will stop, or kaumātua will stop speaking English. They might forget, because that's more of a recent memory as opposed to the reo, which is a long-term memory, which are the parts of the brain which are usually intact still. So you lose your new memories in those pathways before you lose the long-term memories. And as I said, all of these points, Māori kai, rongo Māori, being involved in activities such as rāranga poi, walking, singing, waiata karakia, all of those are, all you're doing is activating the brain. And one of the most important things about being on the marae, and one of the risk factors, which confirms one of the risk factors, is that people are being socially interactive. And we know when you're being socially interactive, you are utilising your brain. If you're not being socially interactive, then you're not using your brain so much. So in that sense, the brain is quite a bit like a muscle, in that you either you use it or you lose it. So social interaction is really important, and I would suggest that everybody does that, irrespective if you're Māori or go onto a marae or not. So join some kind of group and meet and interact with other people. Okay, so I do want to talk about this tool that we are developing, which is just about to be launched. I've been saying that for a while now, and I feel a bit awkward when I say it now, but it is actually right, and it's because of COVID we've been held up. So like all good screening psychometric type of tools, we have what do you call it? An acronym, mate wari. We have an acronym, and it's called the MANA tool, the Māori Assessment of Neuropsychological Abilities. And it's a screening tool for the detection of mate wari in Māori. It will be rolled out into what was the DHBs alongside so the mini-ACE has been used at the moment as a screening tool, and the MANA tool has been accepted by the Health of Older People as being the tool of choice when screening for mate wari in Māori. So we're really excited about this. You know, it's a Māori friendly tool. Well, actually, it's not a Māori friendly tool. I've rethought this. It's a mana enhancing tool. So not only do we think that it's more valid, but it actually provides a better experience for the whānau. So we're asking questions that are relevant to them. We're asking questions that do help to detect mate wari, of course, but we are asking, so we've included content that is meaningful to the person being assessed and to the whānau. So obviously we've included Māori content. And we've never had this in Aotearoa before. I've been administering cognitive tests for 20 years now, and the number of Māori are sitting on the other side of the table from me, looking at me like I'm something from another planet, because I'm asking all these questions of them that don't mean anything, that are not relevant to them, and in fact are invalid in many cases. So it's also a very mana enhancing tool. And what makes our tool different from any other tool, I think, in the world, is that we have included a wairua component, and this is sort of harking back to the reason why I raised the bit about the kaumātua wanting their wairua sort of talked about or included in the assessment. So the wairua component is just that. We ask questions about their wairua. It's not a part of the actual diagnosis, so it's not scored. There's a functional tool and there's a cognitive tool, as is in any other assessment tool. that's used worldwide. And so this is kind of what it looks like, and we looked at the different things that we thought might be mana enhancing, wairua enhancing for kaumata, and we've asked them questions along those lines. And we've consulted widely with kaumata right throughout the country, not just those in Auckland. So when we got the first draft of the tool ready, we brought a whole lot of kaumata up to Tāmaki Makaurau and got them to have a look at it and run through it and discuss it widely. And one woman came to me and she said, well, my mum passed away of mate ware. She said, but if she had this too, if they had used this tool to assess her, she said, I would have been so happy. So that's the function, the wairua component. The functional component is pretty much like all the other functional tools that are widely used, not only in Aotearoa but also around the world, and they cover all the domains that a person who diagnoses would look for in terms of whether or not that person is functioning okay in their everyday life. So you might just see on there, I don't know how clear it is, but we've also kind of inserted a little bit of a lesson in te reo as well. And this is because a lot of the kaumata have said to us, well, it's really, we hate hearing our language, our reos pronounced badly. And so, and even though, people try, we have quite a few recent people who have recently immigrated to this country in that particular era doing those kinds of assessments. So we thought, well, we'll just add in a little a reo class in there, if you like. And so where there is a Māori kupu, we've put the phonetic pronunciation afterwards so that they can have some attempt at pronouncing our kupu correctly. And that's like music to our ears, to Māori. We love hearing our reos pronounced properly. And so the cognitive assessment was the big part. We've done quite a lot of work on it. Won't worry about that one so much, but like this one, so in most of the picture naming tasks, which is, so naming objects like this, looking at pictures is one of the abilities that is lost early-ish in mate ware. So we've just picked out pictures that, that are familiar. Okay, just familiar. And what it does is, what we are seeing is people are looking at it and thinking, this is about me, this is about Māori. It's not about identifying an elephant or a rhinoceros or whatever, which is what is usually depicted. It's about inclusiveness. It's about making Māori feel included. And also we've played a lot around, we've put a lot of attention to the scoring criteria, because in past tests, so we've found that, for example, in one of the widely used tests in the world, people get asked, tell me what the word domestic means. Well, in one study, when a group of Māori men were asked this, they said, oh, that's a fight with the missus. That's an argument with the missus. That's what they said. This is in the vocabulary subtest, of the ways forward, so widely used test around the world. Then they were asked, what does terminate mean? And they, well, that's to kill somebody, this kind of thing. So those guys were, and they were men, they were marked wrong. And so they didn't get scored right. But the reality is they're not wrong. In their world, they're right. So it's the manual that's wrong. It's the scoring criteria that's wrong. So we've put a lot of time and effort into the scoring criteria so that everything that is right is indeed acknowledged as being right. So it's in these kind of subtle ways that there is bias in these types of tests. So we know that education is a major factor in any kind of psychometric testing. So we wanted to try and eliminate that. There's not a lot you can do in a very relatively short test. So in this particular test, we asked the person to spell the word kai. If they can't spell it, then there's a bit of an assumption going on. What we will say is we'll move on to another test, because we think then it's possible, and this is what was overlooked in the Lilac study, is that they didn't consider the education that those kaumata didn't get. So some kaumata never went to school. Some kaumata may as well not have gone to school, given their experience with school back in those days. So we are assuming if you can't spell the word kai, then maybe you don't have, you haven't learnt to spell. So what we do then was we kind of abort that task and we move on to the next task, 12B, which is about repeating numbers, which is less education, which is less dependent on a person's formal education. So we're attempting to address those issues that do impact performance, and those issues that make the tool culturally biased. And there's also a whole lot of questions that the geriatric or the old age psychiatrist or the clinician can ask about the history, and everything, of course, is in te reo. So we're going to be, we'll just go back, we're going to be launching the mana tool very soon, and there will be a video that will accompany it, so that non-Māori clinicians, who are most people who diagnose mate wareware in this country, can follow a video where the client wants to speak te reo. Okay, so there will be, in that video, there will be a Pākehā clinician, a person in the room as well who's interpreting what's been said, and the client who was speaking in the reo. So that will be available as well. And of course all written forms are available in both languages. So I don't know how I'm going for time, but and now we'll just move on to the app. So once again, going back to those three major findings, the kaumātua were crying out for information. Yeah, I carry those, it kind of haunts me a little bit when I hear those stories, because I was so affected by it. So, we just said, we've got to do something about it. So we got a little bit of funding. We developed this Mate Wareware app on a shoestring, but it was launched last year, and since then we have, or just recently actually, we've put it out there and we have piloted it with 5 whānau, three generations within 5 different whānau, got their feedback, and we've applied for more funding. We've got quite a lot more funding now, so this is a work in progress. So now we're going to build on that feedback. We're going to make the tool, we're going to make the app better than what it is. We're going to make it more sophisticated. So we've gone to a commercial company, well, actually they're part of Waiparata Trust, the whānau tahi they're called, and they do all that kind of digital work. And so they're going to make it really just much more user-friendly. We're going to be focusing on rangatahi so that they can be showing their nanny or their koro how to use the app, how to access it. We're going to have a lot more for caretakers in there, and we're going to have a lot more of rongoa Māori in there as well. So that's kind of what it looks like up here. That's when you can see the purple bit, and there's these cards over there. That's what it looks like on your phone. I've got it on my phone. So we decided when we were planning it, we thought, of course, we've got to have karakia. It's got to open with karakia. So our kaumātua at the time, who has passed away sadly, he recorded this karakia, and I'll play it. It's only a minute long. I shouldn't say only, but it's a minute long. So just, I think we'll play it.
Ko te hōkai nuku, ko te hōkai rangi, ko te hōkai a tō tūpuna, a tāne nui a rangi. Te atua kaharawa, te atua ngā mea katoa whakapainga tēnei taonga. Hei taonga hei āwhina atu kia mātou whānau, puta noa, puta noa. He taonga e āwhina mai, ki wēnei a mātou. E pāngi ana ki tēnei o ngā māoiwi ara te mate wareware. Kia piki tō rātou kaha, kia piki tō rātou ora, kia piki tō rātou māramatanga ki tāu I hiehia ai. Tūturu whakamaua kia tina, tina, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e.
So each time a person accesses the app, they can bypass that bit of, it's something that we knew that we had to have there. The app is full of pages of information on what is mate wareware, as this one depicts. We've taken away a lot of the medical jargon and tried to make it as user-friendly as possible, but we've since got feedback that it can be made even more user-friendly, so we will be working on that. So we've got people, so Dame Nada Glavish, who is introducing the app. So we've got short videos throughout. We've got, this is Oliver Menzies, who is talking about definition of mate wari, what happens when mate wari is diagnosed. We've got a short video of Bobby Napier, who works at the Memory Clinic in Middlemore, and she's a social worker. She goes out and works with a lot of whānau, and she's talking about advanced care planning, enduring power of attorney, all those kind of things. And then we have Dr Waiora Port, who is our queer and is sort of awhi'd our rangahau all the way through. And we have an interview with a whānau living with mate wari. Sadly, this she's just gone into aged residential care, the mum here, and so there's lots of links in the app as well. There are links to Alzheimer's New Zealand. There are links to advanced care planning. I'm not sure about EPOA, but anyway, there's a link here. So this is a program, the Attitude program, aired on TV1 a couple of years ago now, and it tells the journey of this. It's a lovely story of this whānau going through that mate wari journey. So that's there as well. There's a page on all the types, and so you just got to click on each one. I don't think the layout is all that clear at the moment. I'm not very happy with it, so that's something that we're working on. As I said, there's stuff about for caregivers there, but there could be a lot more. And there is stuff, there is also information there for our rangatahi, and that we want to gamify so that we're going to really engage them. And also we want to put memory games on there that the kaumātua can use to exercise their brain. In fact, we should all be doing it. I do it all the time. All those types of memory games, any brain games you can get hold of, do them, and keep your nerve cells working. And then, of course, there's a page there on information and support. So I'm not sure what the time is. Oh, that's pretty good timing. So anyway, before I finish up, I do want to talk about cognitive stimulation therapy Māori. It sounds very Pākehā, but because it's a program that was developed in the UK, but it has been shown to be effective in slowing down the progress of people with mild to moderate mate wari. And it's been adapted to many, many different Indigenous populations around the world. And they've all worked. It all works. So we thought, okay, we need to do this. So a group of us have got together, and we have adapted the cognitive stimulation therapy for Māori. And so really, so what we've changed mainly are the 18 principles. We've kind of made them more principles that relate more to a Māori world, although they are similar. When we adapted it, we didn't want to stray too much from the original because that had been validated. So we needed it to know that it was still an effective program. We didn't want to change too much. The activity, so what happens is that kaumātua come together over 15 sessions, and in each session it has a different theme, and it's very activity based, but it helps people draw, or helps kaumātua draw on so it's the basis, the theory behind it is based on reminiscence theory. So what we ask kaumātua to do is to think about, we kind of provide aids and games and activities that prompt their memory from when they were young or back in the day, and then we try and get them to connect those kind of connections with contemporary times. So we're getting them to sort of create new memories. In fact, that's what we're doing. And so there is a prescription, there is a prescribed way, even though it's a lot of the basis or the underpinnings is about having fun. A lot of the criteria of CST is having fun. It also needs to be effective. So So we've got some, so for, I'll just give you one example, and there's a lot of flexibility in it. So one of the sessions is about food, and so the facilitators can bring along pictures of food that we used to eat, pictures of food that we eat now, you know, groceries that we might buy now. But people can also bring along food and talk about it, and the facilitators create a discussion around that kai. It's a lot of fun. It's very activity based. We are saying that there are two facilitators for CST Māori. The main facilitator must speak the reo, because you're working with kaumātua and they will want to speak the reo. Many of them will, but by doing so, what you're doing is triggering that sort of second pathway, that cognitive reserve, if you like, that they have in terms of that first language that they acquired. So the first facilitator should be able to speak the reo, and the second facilitator, not so important, but should have a sprinkling of the reo. And so we're about to launch that as well. That's been quite a long process, and we piloted it down in Whakatane, and was really, we applied some pre and post measures, and that came across very successfully. So it showed that it was effective as well. Now I would like to bring that program to Tairāwhiti next year. So we Alzheimer's New Zealand have funded us to take the program to 5 areas around the Motu, and one of the areas I'd like to bring it to is to Tairāwhiti, and what we will do is we'll train people to become facilitators in the CST program, and then they can go away and run the programs in their own NGOs or whatever, or their own hapu or marae or whatever. So that's just something I'd like to, and if anybody is interested in being learning to be a trainer, then you can contact us on those email addresses. So, yeah, ko motu tēnei koriroa, nō reira tēnā koutou.
Ngā mihi, Dr. Dudley. Just want to thank Dr. Dudley for your really enlightening talk on mate wharewhare. The stories of yours and other people's journeys really help us with the understanding and help to demystify mate wharewhare, and also by making that information more accessible. So yeah, for me it was just nice to hear these sort of how you're talking with people with your kaumātua, and that holistic inclusive approach can drive our research. This is a great lesson for us at Mātai. Can drive our research and discoveries and our understanding that can help directly feed back into our community. So it's a wonderful example, and so thank you for coming, Dr. Dudley.
You're most welcome.
And I just want to mention that I was actually thinking we might just want to have a quick 5-minute break, and where we can just have a little break. And I also wanted to mention that there was a little bit of a miscommunication from us. Dr. Dudley we thought was going to be speaking tomorrow night. We was actually Dr. Dudley's only going to be here for the AMP show tomorrow during the day tomorrow. So if anyone knows of anyone thinking they're coming to the Elgin Turanga Health hui, can you please let them know that it's Dr. Dudley. Unfortunately, it was our fault. She's not going to be able to be there. But please come along to our Mātai tent, because Dr. Dudley will be there all day. Yes. So please definitely come and chat in person with Dr. Dudley tomorrow at the Mātai tent, rain or shine. So, but before, is there any questions? Any questions for Dr. Dudley? Pressing questions?
I just found it a little bit difficult. My husband's Māori.
Yes.
He's 74, so I don't know whether you class him as an old kaumātua or anything like that.
Yeah.
He's not been brought up.
Yeah. In the Māori world.
Like,
yeah.
That's
okay. This is. Well, it might be, it might not. It's not for everybody, and there are a lot of people like that, but who knows, it might trigger some memories. He may have spoken. Did he ever speak the reo when he was a wee? No, well, I didn't either. And I'm kind of around that age area bracket, but so it may not be for him.
No,
Yeah. But
he won't mix with, you know, you sound like it'd be neat if I could just get him to go places, but he won't mix with anybody.
it might mix with anybody. Yeah, that's a shame.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not for him,
Yeah,
but
I just thought like
no, but yeah. Thanks.
I've got a question around the brain games.
Yes.
So is there anything you recommend it for those who are wanting to do something at home? Do you have any favourite brain games?
Well, look, you know, crosswords. You know, the games, any memory games. The game where you have a pack of cards and you find the pairs. They're great. They're easy. Anybody can do it. Getting the person who you're with to read a small passage in a newspaper, and then getting them to relay that, talk to you, tell them about that particular item in their words, in their own words. That's another way of them storing memories, storing information, rearranging it so you know that they've really attended to it. They put it into some kind of storage in their memory bank, and they are relaying it back to you. That's another good, easy one you can do across the breakfast table with a newspaper sort of thing. But like any games that are easily accessible, especially on our phones these days, definitely encourage everybody to do them, really. Yeah. Kia ora.
Kia ora. You had 12 risk factors, and I wondered if there was a difference between men and women and the incidence of risks.
Well, women do present more with mate wari, but that's probably because there are more women living longer. I think that's probably, I don't know proportionately, I don't know, do you know? No, the trouble is with, like in New Zealand, we haven't had a prevalence study. So we don't really know. A lot of what we know is it's kind of been, it's based on data that's been conducted overseas on other Indigenous people. Having said that, we were fortunate, once again, a team of us have been fortunate enough to be granted quite a substantial amount of funding to conduct a mate wari prevalence study in Aotearoa on Māori. So we've actually started, we're doing all the admin stuff, and we will be hitting the road early next year, and once again we might come to Tairāwhiti to conduct a prevalence study. That will be the first, to my knowledge, Indigenous mate wari prevalence study in the world. And because, I feel a bit slightly uncomfortable with Australian visitors here, but Māori lead the way on many different aspects of research in Māori health. We know that. And so this is another area which we kind of like trailblazing a little bit, yeah.
I just have a question on the age thing. You said it was octogenarians.
Yeah.
So anything younger, because our whanaunga is just 60.
Yeah.
So,
I was just talking, that particular study was on 80-year-olds and older. But yes, we suspect, just anecdotally, we know that, and that little bit of information that's come out of Middlemore, that we may be younger when we get our mate wari, sadly. But we will see. Really, the prevalence study we are doing is we're capturing 65 years of age and older, but really I think we should be looking at 55 years of age and older. But of course, then you get so many more people that to get that kind of funding in New Zealand it doesn't exist. So we're just going to do the best that we can. And it's, I had a friend, she's a senior OT in Rotorua, and she said to me, she goes to Tūrangi a lot, she said, I swear, she said, every second kaumātua there has got mate wari. And she said, oh, but they haven't been diagnosed. But I said, well, why? And she said, because they won't go to the hospital. They're too whakamā. And the services are not accommodating our koe and kaumātua. They'd rather just not know about it and just carry on.
Yeah.
Not good. Yeah.
There was one here first.
Oh.
Kia ora. I'm Cheryl Morley. I work with Alzheimer's Gisborne.
Oh, yeah.
I've been in my role 8 years, and I have been to many assessments with whānau where their loved one is going to be put through a moka or the mini ACE.
Yeah.
And thank goodness your your new assessment tools coming out, I've seen those people destroyed because they're irrelevant, particularly for males using those animals. Some of the questions asked, they're not taking in constant, in consideration of when a couple have been together for a long time. Often the wife does speak for the man, and it's just soul destroying to see what it is doing, and it's set up to fail.
It
These
is.
people walk away totally shattered. So that is a great, huge tool and gives my heart joy to see that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We've, word's got around that it is coming. I get inundated with emails from people all over, from every all sort of sectors of society, wanting to know when it's going to be ready. So we've really got our skates on now and trying to get it out ASAP.
Well, I just have one more, and anyone else, please come along to the tent tomorrow. Got one here.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
I have an issue with one of my sisters being angry. The anger stuff that's coming through is kind of not very good. So would this help her?
Well, this is one of the areas I want to address. I don't think we've got enough information there for caregivers, because people with mate wari who exhibit anger, sometimes it's frustration, sometimes it's fear, but their ability to demonstrate or exhibit that fear or frustration, anxiety, they no longer have. Those pathways have disappeared in their brain, so it may manifest as anger, but that's not actually what they're feeling. It's not always the case, but it's sometimes the case. So caregivers need to know this sort of information, and sadly it's lacking in that sort of, but that's something I definitely want to address. And because there was a statistic that came out that said that more caregivers die than people with mate wari wari. Glad my mum didn't get mate wari.
Well, thank you, ngā mihi, Dr Dudley.
Thank you.
So thank you again. We might just have a very short break just while we set up our next speakers, so please get the breath of fresh air and mingle a bit.